a really difficult evaluation, honestly. That's where I come down with Xavier Legette.
6'1", 221, and ran a 4.39 with a 40-inch vertical. That's outrageous.
He did nothing until his fifth year, like pretty much nothing. And then he balls out. I mean, really balls out production-wise in his fifth year. Like everything from a production standpoint looks good.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Hey, listen, we got 2 new profiles up on the site here, receptionperception.com. Go check it out. Troy Franklin and Xavier Legette, 2 players that I am so interested in. And actually, I want to start with Xavier Legette because he was the player that I was the most fascinated with and was really curious to see what some of the RP data would come back with. And it's funny, the reason I was curious about this kid from South Carolina was because I'm watching him on a film and I'm like, oh man, I don't know. This might not be a good RP profile, but I love the guy, you know? So there's like these 2 conflicting emotions I got in me here. And certainly when I read the profile, I felt like that's kind of sort of the road we were going down, Matt.
That's actually honestly kind of the journey I went down with Xavier Legette too, pretty similarly. Because number one, like just put the reception perception part aside, he has like the weirdest profile, you know, you'll ever see from a college player because he did nothing until his fifth year, like pretty much nothing. He caught a few passes here or there, but like production wise did nothing, barely really played, didn't command a lot of volume. And then he balls out. I mean, really balls out production wise in his fifth year. Like everything from a production standpoint looks good. And he did it all at the same school. Like you never see that. His
yeah, exactly.
His journey is worth looking into. Like he's lost both of his parents. He had a serious motorcycle accident. Like he had some injuries and stuff. So there's a lot of context as to why his production and like resume looks like it does. So you turn on the film, you look at reception perception for that final year, and he's definitely he's got the size and speed, and like the size and speed combination is gonna get some NFL team to fall in love with him. Absolutely, you know, like a guy that's over 200 pounds, that's 6'1", runs that 40, man. I know that's got to have James Koh, you know, your ears perking up. You got
I'm fanning myself over here, bro. He's 221 and ran a 4.39. Who does this? What? That's absurd. 6'1", 221, and ran a 4.39 with a 40-inch vertical. That's outrageous.
Yeah, and that shows up on the game film too. Like he's not one of these guys like, oh, look at the testing and then you don't see it. But you see it. You see it when you watch him play.
Right.
Now that being said, like the route running is definitely not there for Xavier Legette. He's for a fifth-year player at 23 years old, he is raw as a route runner. That shows up in his man and press coverage success rates. 19th percentile success rate versus man, 62.2%, 54.5% success rate versus press, which is 19th percentile. So if you're listening to this or watching this, like go listen to or watch the Keon Coleman segment that we did. He fits into that bucket of players that like this type of guy, usually if they're going to hit in the NFL, they have to move to the slot or they're going to be like a volatile deep threat. I could really see either career path for Xavier Legette playing out. Because if you look at like his route success rate charts and you look at his zone coverage success rate, it's actually pretty good. 81.4% success rate versus zone coverage. And he's good. He has an above average success rate on these like slants and dig routes, like the crossing routes and things like that. So I actually can see I know that people are going to be sick of me saying this by now. We're this close to the draft. I'm going to have just such a better understanding of Xavier Legette and like what his career is going to play out with, like when we see where he lands, because I don't think he has the skills right now, and you kind of have to be like, you're saying this despite the fact he's 23 years old and he's like been in school for 5 years and he's still a developing player. That leads you to be concerned, but I don't think he has the skills right now to run out as an X receiver, you know, and do that, right? I don't think that that's there, but I do think he can contribute to an NFL offense. I think there is a role for him It's just, is the coaching staff going to agree with that he goes to? Are they going to toss him out at X because that size, speed combination? I don't think he's ready to do that right now, but I think he can contribute in other ways.
So the thing I love about Legette is downfield. Okay, so we'll talk about some of the success rates for Legette, and obviously they're not great. Okay, like on the 9 route, a 44% success rate at the collegiate level is not very good. Clearly, you want to be above 50%. And at the collegiate level, above 55%, right? So 44% success rate on the 9, not great, right? 50% success rate on the corner, again, not good. 64.7%, we'll call it 65% success rate on the post route, again, not great, right? Like these are numbers where on the post you want to be above 70%, on the corner you want to be, around 60, more than 65%. On the 9 you want to be above 50%. He's below all those marks. I get it for Legette. But when you watch the guy play, though, Matt, it's just, I know it's not a successful route, but he's getting the ball because, my God, he's just so big. He's so strong. I love the subtle hand fighting he does kind of sort of below the shoulder pads. He doesn't push off above the shoulder pads where it's noticeable. What he does is he pushes off very subtly below the shoulder pads, creates just a little bit of separation to go get that football. That's what I like. Is the play strength for Xavier Legette, man. This guy's just so strong, man. And I think that strength translates to the NFL level.
Yeah, I kind of compare him to like Alshon Jeffrey if he's going to stick as an outside receiver.
Love that. I love that comp. Yes.
He was a guy that actually had some really productive seasons, right? He had one season with 1,400 yards across from Brandon Marshall in Chicago, if memory serves.
Right.
Like he was... But then most of his other seasons were kind of between 800, 900 yards. Like I could see in a best case scenario is if he's going to be an outside guy, Legette ends up as that type of player where he's not a high separation player. Alshon Jeffrey was never a high separation player, but he was that type of, I go up and get the football and I can just like be stronger and physical. And like the route running did develop with Alshon Jeffrey, even if the separation never really got there. So I think that's sort of like the comparison I like from an outside receiver perspective. But man, part of me does think that he should be almost deployed in like the non-gimmicky running backy type Deebo Samuel stuff. And like, look, yeah. I think, and by the way, another South Carolina player, weirdly enough, I don't mean to be doing this, just doing all these same school comps. I just think that like, that's kind of who he is. Look, nobody is Deebo Samuel. I think I said this on our show earlier this week that like he should be a non-comparable player. I'm just talking from like a role perspective, the way that the 49ers use Deebo as a pure receiver, where he's still primarily an outside guy. He's not a big slot guy, but he's also just like not a good route runner against press man coverage, but they find ways to hide that, by using him kind of in these tight split alignments. They find ways to get him off the ball. They find ways to get him in full speed motion plays and kind of running these routes over the middle of the field, which if you look at Xavier Legette's route success rate chart, his best routes are the slant and the dig, like routes running over the middle of the field. So if you can get him in that type of role, that's personally what, if I was the wide receiver coach for the team that drafts Xavier Legette, or really wants to take Xavier Legette, I'm trying to push us towards that deployment for the player and kind of away from the Alshon Jeffrey deployment of the player, even though I think like if he's going to hit as an outside receiver, it's going to be in that Alshon type way. Xavier
Legette is if like you were to like meld some parts of Alshon Jeffrey with Deebo Samuel, that's the kind of player you get with Legette. That's why even though I like some of his, numbers are not good, I'm really high on this player because in today's NFL, you could run bunch format. Of course, dude. Come on, man. 220. I'm just going to go back to 221, ran a 4.3940. Come on, dog. Let's go. It's that simple. No, it's really not.
Yeah.
Look, he's great against zone coverage, which I really like. And I think the points that you were making, and I've heard this before too. Look, he rounds into his cuts, right? Like he's not a sharp route runner. And I get it. That's why when you watch this guy play, I'm like, man, there's no way he's going to score that well in RP. But just Jesus Christ, when he gets the football, and because he's so good versus zone coverage, there's just so much to like about this guy's game. And I just feel so strongly about this. Like, I think he can play X, but he's going to be one of these just overall weapons for an NFL football team, where we talk about, hey, listen, Keon Coleman needs to play a power slot and he needs to have a very niche role. I don't really see that for Xavier Legette. I think in today's modern NFL, Legette can parachute in and just straight up be a weapon all over the football field.
Yeah, I don't see him being the power slot conversion that I see for these other guys, which, by the way, could put him in the other bucket of receiver. Now, he's not quite this type of player either. He's a really difficult evaluation, honestly. That's where I come down with Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette is the most difficult evaluation in this class because there's just like a lot of pieces to parse out, and like he's definitely a profile worth reading on the site, not just like looking at the colors or looking at the percentiles. Right. Like he's a guy that's worth it's worth just imagining these different type of roles. But to bring it back to the Alshon Jeffrey point, I don't have reception perception data on Alshon Jeffrey's early, like the 2013, because that was before reception perception actually. But if you look at just some of his final seasons with the Chicago Bears and then early seasons with the Eagles, I'll give you the 2016 and the 2017 numbers. 65.6% success rate versus man and 61.4% success rate versus man in those two seasons. Those are both below average marks. But you look at success rate versus zone, 79.4%, 77.4%. You even look at some of the other seasons with the Eagles, 78%, 78%. The success rate versus press, they're all below average. So, like, again, kind of similar to Xavier Legette, where the press man ability, and like the thing is, it's like Xavier Legette's so much faster. So, like, if he develops the route running that really Alshon didn't have, like, even if he is not a great route runner, whatever, he's going to have more high yield explosive moments because Jeffrey just wasn't that guy necessarily, in my opinion. So could he be that type of player? I think that actually gives you sort of a picture that, like, yeah, Alshon Jeffrey was better against zone coverage than he was man coverage as a separator underneath and stuff like that. And maybe that's Legette's future. I think it could be.